The classroom on Station Kepler 9 was filled with the soft hum of translation devices and the quiet rustle of students settling into their seats. Instructor Vex Thal stood at the front, her silver scales catching the artificial light as she prepared the day's lesson. She was Zenthari, a species known for their logical minds and careful approach to everything, especially danger. Today we discuss fear, Vex Thal announced, her voice calm and measured. Fear is universal among intelligent species. How we handle it defines our survival. The classroom held 43 students from 12 different species. They sat in various configurations, some in chairs, others on specialized platforms, suited to their body types. Near the back, 3 human cadets sat together. Marcus Chen, Aisha Okonkwo, and James Rodriguez. They looked like typical academy students in their gray uniforms, taking notes on their data tablets. Vex Thal activated the large holographic display. Images of different species appeared, each with accompanying data charts and biological information. The Corthians, she explained, gesturing to a crystalline being in the image, enter what they call battle meditation. Their heart rate slows. Their thoughts become focused. Fear makes them calmer, more precise. A Corthian student in the front row nodded with obvious pride. The Silixians release calming pheromones. Vex Thal continued, showing an image of a moth-like creature. They share peace with their entire unit. Fear becomes diluted across many minds. She moved through several more examples. The Draconids accessed ancient genetic memories that told them exactly how their ancestors survived similar threats. The Viridians entered a trance state that let them see multiple possible futures. The Zenthari, her own species, simply froze and analyzed until they found the logical solution. Each species had evolved a sensible response to danger. Each one made perfect evolutionary sense. Then Vex Thal reached the human entry in her database. She paused, her sensory tendrils twitching with confusion. The data was sparse, contradictory. Some reports claimed humans became aggressive when afraid. Others said humans could think clearly during terror. Some noted humans did foolish things when frightened. None of it formed a coherent pattern. Humans, she said slowly, looking at her 3 human students. Your species joined the coalition only 30 cycles ago. Our data on your fear response is incomplete. Marcus sat up straighter. Perhaps you could enlighten the class? Vex Thal suggested. How does humanity manage fear in dangerous situations? 10. Vex Thal. The other students turned to look at the humans with interest. Humans were still relatively new and strange to most of them. They looked fragile compared to the armored Corthians or the powerful Draconids. They had no natural weapons, no thick shells, no venom. How did such soft creatures even survive their homeworld? Marcus raised his hand. Instructor, I could try to explain with words, but I think a demonstration would be clearer. Vex Thal considered this. The Academy encouraged practical learning. Yes, that would be helpful for everyone. Please proceed. We'll need to use the training simulator, Aisha added, standing up. Just for about 10 minutes. Of course. Vex Thal activated the classroom's holographic training suite, a sophisticated system used to recreate various combat scenarios. She also turned on the recording system, as she did for all practical demonstrations. These recordings were kept for academic review and study. The 3 humans moved to the front of the class. James pulled up a control panel and began programming the simulator. Marcus and Aisha discussed something quietly between themselves, nodding in agreement. What scenario will you show us? Asked Tkor, a young Zenthari student whose curiosity always exceeded his patience. Something from Coalition history, James replied, his fingers moving across the holographic controls. The Siege of Karthok's Station. Everyone knows this battle, right? Several students murmured in agreement. The Siege of Carthox was famous. A defensive battle where coalition forces held a critical supply station against raiders for 3 days until reinforcements arrived. It was taught as an example of good defensive coordination and resource management. We're going to modify it slightly, Aisha explained. We'll remove the reinforcements, make the supplies run lower, add more attackers. Basically, we're creating what humans call a worst-case scenario. Why would you train for the worst case? Asked Moth. Who seeks dawn? A Silixian student whose translated voice was barely a whisper. Surely you train for likely scenarios? Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. Humans have a saying: hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We train for scenarios where everything goes wrong because, in our history, everything going wrong was pretty common. The simulation activated. The classroom lights dimmed as the holographic display expanded, showing a detailed recreation of Carthox Station. The students watched as holographic humans, coalition defenders, took positions throughout the station. The enemy appears, James narrated as hostile ships surrounded the station. Communications are jammed. No reinforcements are coming. Supplies are limited. The defenders realize they're probably going to die here. The class watched carefully. This was the moment where species showed their fear responses. The Corthians would expect to see meditation protocols activate. The Zenthari anticipated logical analysis paralysis, the defenders freezing to calculate their options. What happened next made Vexthal's tendrils go completely still. The holographic humans didn't freeze. They didn't enter meditation. Instead, they started moving faster. Their communication became rapid and intense. They began improvising, taking supplies meant for one purpose and using them for something completely different. One defender, cornered and out of ammunition, grabbed a piece of broken equipment and turned it into a weapon. Another set up an elaborate trap using nothing but emergency medical supplies. Your biometric readings show high stress, Tikor observed, pointing at the data streaming alongside the simulation. Their heart rates are elevated. Stress hormones are flooding their systems. They're clearly experiencing fear. Ras? Yes, Marcus agreed simply. But they're not responding appropriately, Tikor insisted, his voice rising with agitation. Fear should trigger protective responses. This is aggressive behavior. Increasingly aggressive behavior. The simulation continued. As the situation worsened, the holographic humans fought harder, not less. When supplies ran out, they improvised. When positions became untenable, they adapted. When all logic said to surrender, they kept fighting. Vexthal watched in growing confusion. According to every psychological model she'd studied, this shouldn't work. Fear existed to promote survival through caution. These humans were doing the opposite, using fear as some kind of fuel. I don't understand, she finally admitted. And for a Zenthari to admit confusion was significant. They're clearly terrified. The data shows it. But instead of becoming more careful, they're becoming more dangerous, Aisha finished quietly. Yes, instructor. That's exactly right. The simulation ended with the holographic humans still fighting, refusing to surrender even when defeat was mathematically certain. The classroom fell into stunned silence. Vexthal looked at the 3 human cadets standing before her. They weren't smiling. They weren't proud. They just looked, resigned, as if they'd shown something they knew would cause confusion. Perhaps, Vexthal said slowly, we need to discuss this further. She had no idea that this simple classroom demonstration would reach Coalition High Command within hours, or that the footage she'd just recorded would be classified by morning. All she knew was that humans handled fear differently than any species she'd ever studied. And that difference felt deeply, profoundly unsettling. The silence in the classroom stretched uncomfortably. Vexthal's sensory tendrils moved in small, agitated circles, a sign of deep confusion in Zenthari body language. The other students shifted in their seats, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," Vexthal said carefully. "You are saying that when humans experience fear, you become more aggressive rather than more cautious?" "Not exactly," James replied, returning to stand with Marcus and Aisha at the front of the class. "We don't stop being afraid. The fear doesn't go away. We just redirect it." We don't stop. Redirect it. "Redirect it where?" asked a Draconid student named Sith, her ridged head tilting in genuine curiosity. "Into action," Marcus answered. "Into movement. Into problem solving. Humans are really bad at staying still when we're scared." Aisha pulled up her personal data tablet and projected new information onto the classroom display. Charts and graphs appeared, showing human physiological responses to stress and danger. "This is human biochemistry during fear response," she explained, highlighting various chemical compounds. "We produce adrenaline, cortisol, and several other hormones. These chemicals do specific things to our bodies." She pointed to each effect as she listed them. "Increased heart rate, faster breathing, better oxygen flow to muscles, heightened awareness, faster reaction time, reduced pain sensitivity. It's like our bodies are preparing us for intense physical activity. That's the fight or flight response," Tikor said, recognition in his voice. "Most species have something similar. But the logical response is flight, running away from danger. Humans have fight or flight too," James confirmed. "But our version seems to be broken. The flight option often doesn't work properly." "Broken how?" Vexthal asked. Marcus took over the explanation. "Most of the time, when a human gets scared enough, we can't run away even if we want to. Something in our brain refuses. Instead, we either freeze completely or we fight. And since freezing usually gets you killed, humans evolved to default to fighting." He pulled up historical footage from Earth, carefully selected to demonstrate his point. The class watched as human firefighters ran into burning buildings, while everyone else ran out. They saw human Coast Guard members diving into stormy seas to save drowning people. They watched human doctors and nurses treating dangerous diseases without protective equipment because none was available. "These people were terrified," Aisha said quietly. "Every single one of them. Their recordings and journals tell us that. But they went forward anyway, because someone needed help." Moth Who Seeks Dawn spoke up, their whisper voice barely audible even through the translator. "But this is suicidal behavior. Why would evolution favor this? You should have died out." We almost did," Marcus admitted. "Many times, actually. Humans nearly went extinct at least 6 times that we know of. Ice ages, volcanic winters, plagues, predators. Each time, we survived by being too stubborn to lie down and die." The classroom display shifted to show Earth's evolutionary history. The students saw a planet that seemed designed to kill everything on it. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, scarce resources, natural disasters. "Most intelligent species evolved on relatively stable worlds," James explained. "Your homeworlds had challenges, but they were survivable with caution and planning. Earth was different. Being cautious meant starving. Planning ahead only worked if you survived today first." He showed images of early humans hunting animals much larger and more dangerous than themselves. Humans with simple spears facing down creatures with claws, horns, and massive size advantages. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters," Aisha continued. "We couldn't outrun our prey. We couldn't overpower them. So we chased them until they collapsed from exhaustion. Sometimes that took hours. Sometimes days. And yes, the prey was dangerous. Yes, We were afraid, but we hunted them anyway, because the alternative was starvation. Sith, the Draconid student, made a clicking sound of disbelief. You hunted while afraid? That contradicts every predator instinct I know. Predators hunt when they feel confident, when the prey is weak. Human prey was never weak, Marcus said flatly. Everything on Earth could kill us. We were small, soft, slow, and had no natural weapons. So we learned to be afraid and hunt anyway. Fear just meant the prey was worth hunting. The implications settled over the classroom like a heavy blanket. These students were training to be coalition officers and soldiers. They understood tactical thinking, and what the humans were describing sounded less like courage and more like a species-wide psychological anomaly. Wait, Takor interrupted, his analytical mind working through the problem. You said humans nearly went extinct multiple times. So this behavior isn't successful. It's just less unsuccessful than the alternatives? Exactly, Aisha confirmed. Human bravery isn't noble or glorious. It's just the least bad option we could evolve. We're brave because being scared and doing nothing kills you faster than being scared and doing something. Vexthal had been quiet, processing everything. Now she spoke, her voice carrying a note of concern. Let me test my understanding with a hypothetical scenario. If I placed a human soldier in an impossible situation surrounded, outnumbered, no hope of victory, what would they do? The three human cadets looked at each other. Finally, Marcus answered. Depends on the human, but most would keep fighting until they physically couldn't anymore. Not because we think we can win. Marcus, we think we can win, but because surrendering or giving up feels worse than fighting. Even if fighting is illogical? Vexthal pressed. Especially then, James said. Humans are really good at choosing the illogical option. If the logical option feels like giving up. The classroom erupted in questions. Students from different species all wanted to understand this strange psychological quirk. How did humans make decisions if fear didn't stop them? What about self-preservation? What about tactical retreat? Aisha raised her hands for quiet. Look, we're not saying humans are fearless. We're terrified all the time. Starting a new job? Terrified. Asking someone on a date? Terrified. Public speaking? Terrified. The difference is that humans learn to function while terrified because waiting until we weren't scared anymore meant never doing anything. She pulled up one final piece of data: human military history. Battles where humans had been outnumbered and won. Last stands where humans held impossible positions. Retreats where humans fought every step of the way instead of simply fleeing. This is the Siege of Thermopylae, she said, highlighting one ancient battle. 300 Spartan soldiers held off an army of thousands. They knew they would die. They stayed anyway. This is the defense of Stalingrad, Marcus added, showing another conflict. Humans fighting in a frozen city with limited supplies. Logically, they should have surrendered. Instead, they fought for months. This is the Apollo 13 mission, James finished, showing footage from human space exploration. An explosion in space. 3 humans in a damaged craft. Everyone calculated they would die. They made it home anyway by refusing to accept that calculation. The pattern was clear and deeply troubling. Humans didn't overcome fear to accomplish great things. They accomplished great things while being afraid, often in situations where they knew they probably wouldn't survive. Vexthal made a decision. She touched a control on her podium, flagging the recording of this class session. A message appeared on her screen asking for classification level. She paused, thinking. This wasn't just interesting academic information. This was tactical data about how an entire species responded to stress and danger. If humans really did fight harder when they should be retreating, that had implications for military planning, alliance strategies, and threat assessment. She selected Command Review Recommended and added a note. Human fear response differs significantly from established psychological models, may have defensive and tactical implications. Request analysis by Coalition Strategic Command. The message sent. Vex Thal had no idea she'd just started a chain of events that would reach the highest levels of coalition leadership within hours. She turned back to her human students. Thank you for this demonstration. I think we all learned something important today. Marcus, Aisha, and James nodded and returned to their seats. Around them, other students whispered and discussed what they'd witnessed. In the back of the room, Tukor made a private note in his own files. Humans are either the bravest species in the coalition or the most broken. Possibly both. He wasn't wrong. The class session should have ended there. But Vex Thal found herself unable to move on to the next topic. Her carefully planned curriculum about fear management across species now felt incomplete, almost dishonest. She looked at the 3 human cadets who had just revealed something that contradicted decades of established psychological theory. One more question, Vex Thal said, her tendrils curling thoughtfully. Surely this aggressive fear response is only during combat situations. In normal daily life, humans manage fear like other species. Yes? Way. The 3 humans exchanged those looks again, the kind of silent communication that suggested they were about to reveal something else that would confuse everyone. Aisha stood up slowly. Instructor, may I show something else? It's relevant. Vex Thal gestured for her to proceed, though a small part of her mind wondered if she really wanted to know more. Aisha connected her personal data archive to the classroom display. Images began appearing, not military scenes, but everyday human life. The other students leaned forward, curious about this glimpse into human civilian culture. The first image showed human firefighters. But these weren't soldiers or trained warriors. These were ordinary citizens who volunteered for this work. The footage showed them running into a burning structure while everyone else fled in the opposite direction. These are firefighters, Aisha explained. They respond to fires, accidents, and disasters. Most human cities have them. They're considered normal, essential workers, but they're running toward danger. Moth, who seeks dawn, observed, their voice confused. While experiencing fear, I can see it in their body language. Yes, Aisha confirmed. Being a firefighter is considered an honorable, normal profession on Earth. Dangerous. Yes, but normal. The next image showed human medical workers during what the caption identified as the COVID-19 pandemic. Doctors and nurses treating highly contagious patients, often with inadequate protective equipment. Many were clearly exhausted, stressed, and afraid. None of them had stopped working. During this plague, Marcus added, standing to join Aisha, human medical workers treated the sick even when they knew they might get infected themselves. Thousands of them died. The rest kept working. That's not logical, Tukor protested. Self-preservation should override professional duty. Should, James agreed from his seat. But for humans, it usually doesn't. We have this concept called duty, and it often overrides survival instinct. Aisha continued showing images. Human mountain rescue teams climbing dangerous peaks to save stranded climbers. Human lifeguards swimming into rough waters to reach drowning people. Human teachers staying with their students during natural disasters instead of fleeing to safety. Each example showed humans choosing danger over safety, choosing to help others despite their fear. Here's one that really demonstrates our point, Aisha said, pulling up footage that made several students gasp. It showed a human parent gender unclear from the video throwing themselves in front of a moving vehicle to push their child out of its path. The parent was struck and injured. The child survived. This happens regularly, Aisha said quietly. Parents sacrificing themselves for children. Humans running into danger to save family members, friends, even complete strangers. We call it heroism, but really, it's just how we're built. Sith, the Draconid student, spoke up with clear frustration in her voice. But this contradicts basic evolutionary principles. Individuals who sacrifice themselves don't pass on their genes. This behavior should have been eliminated from your species. Marcus took over the explanation, pulling up biological and evolutionary data. You're right that it seems contradictory, but humans evolved as social creatures. We survived in groups. A human alone on Earth would die quickly. So we developed strong instincts to protect the group, even at personal cost. He showed data on human brain chemistry, hormones like oxytocin that promoted bonding, mirror neurons that made humans feel others' pain as their own, and the complex emotional systems that made humans form deep attachments. When a human sees another human in danger, especially someone they care about, their brain doesn't calculate survival odds, Marcus explained. It just reacts. The fear is there, but it gets overridden by something stronger. The need to protect. Also fine now. What could be stronger than fear? Asked a student, from a species the humans hadn't learned the name of yet. A creature with crystalline skin that refracted light in rainbow patterns. Love. Aisha answered simply. Duty. Compassion. Loyalty. Humans feel these things very strongly. Strong enough to override our fear response completely. She pulled up one final set of data that made the entire class go silent. It was a psychological study from Earth about human stress responses. The data showed that humans experienced fear and anxiety about almost everything: social situations, financial problems, health concerns, future uncertainties. According to the study, the average human experienced anxiety-inducing situations multiple times per day. This can't be accurate, Vexthal said, her voice showing rare emotion. This suggests humans exist in a near-constant state of low-level fear. That's correct, James confirmed, standing to join his fellow humans at the front. About our jobs, our families, our health, our future. Whether people like us, whether we're doing well enough, we're basically afraid all the time about something. The classroom fell into shocked silence. The implications were staggering. Every species experienced fear, but usually in response to immediate, real threats. The idea of living with constant background anxiety seemed unbearable. How do you function? Moth Who Seeks Dawn whispered. Constant fear should be paralyzing. It is for some humans, Aisha admitted. We have conditions called anxiety disorders, where the fear becomes too much. But most humans just live with it. We go to work while worried about money. We raise children while afraid we're not doing it right. We build relationships while scared of rejection. We create art while terrified it won't be good enough. We do everything while afraid, Marcus added, because if we waited until we weren't scared, we'd never do anything at all. Vexthal's mind raced through the implications. She thought about coalition military doctrine, which assumed that all species had predictable fear responses. She thought about threat assessment models that relied on understanding when an enemy would break under pressure. She thought about the Verikan principle, the fundamental theory of combat psychology that said every force had a fear threshold beyond which they would collapse. Humans apparently didn't have that threshold, or if they did, it was so high that they'd be physically destroyed before reaching it psychologically. You're telling me? Vexthal said slowly, choosing her words carefully, that human soldiers in combat are experiencing approximately the same fear response as humans giving a speech at a social gathering? Worse, actually, James said. Combat fear is more intense, but the mechanism is the same. Feel afraid. Do the thing anyway. Deal with the consequences later. And the consequences? Vexthal asked. The three humans looked uncomfortable for the first time. Marcus answered. We have a condition called post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. It happens when humans experience or witness terrible things. The fear and trauma catch up with us later. Sometimes, years later. Many human soldiers suffer from it. So there is a cost, Scythe noted. There's always a cost, Aisha confirmed. Humans don't overcome fear without consequences. We just pay the price later, instead of in the moment. Because in the moment, surviving is more important than being undamaged. Vexthal made another decision. She touched her podium controls again and upgraded her previous flag on the recording. This time, she selected Priority Command Review, Immediate. She added a new note. Human psychological profile requires complete revision. Standard fear-based tactical assumptions do not apply. Recommend urgent strategic analysis. This has implications for Alliance warfare doctrine. The message transmitted immediately to Station Kepler-9's command center. Within minutes, it would be forwarded to General Korthak's office. Vexthal looked at her students, all 43 of them, including the 3 humans who had just taught her more than she'd taught them. Class dismissed, she said quietly. I need to review today's material. Think carefully about what we've learned. We will discuss this further tomorrow. As the students filed out, talking excitedly among themselves, Vexthal watched the 3 humans leave last. They walked together, talking in low voices, probably aware that they'd just revealed something significant about their species. Vexthal pulled up the recording of the class and watched it again. The simulation. The explanations. The data about humans living with constant fear, but functioning anyway. She made a private note in her personal files, one that would never be part of any official report. Question for further study. Are humans the bravest species in the galaxy, or are they simply too stubborn to acknowledge when they should give up? Perhaps the answer is both. Perhaps there is no difference. Access. Outside her office, the recording was already moving up the chain of command, marked with priority flags that ensured it would reach the highest levels of coalition leadership. The simple classroom question about fear had become something much larger. And everyone involved was about to learn just how seriously Coalition Command took this kind of information. General Korthak stood in his private office on Station Kepler-9, his crystalline body reflecting the light from multiple data screens surrounding him. As the station's commanding officer, he reviewed hundreds of reports daily. Most were routine. Training updates, supply requests, maintenance schedules. He processed them efficiently, as befitting a Korthian officer. Then a priority-flagged message appeared on his primary screen. The tag read, Urgent, Psychological Warfare Implications, Human Species Profile. Korthak's crystalline plates clicked together a Korthian expression of interest. He opened the file and began watching the classroom footage from Instructor Vexthal's session. His tactical analyst, a Viridian named Quellis, stood beside him. She had 20 years of experience in combat psychology. They watched in silence as the 3 human cadets explained and demonstrated their species' fear response. The simulation played out. The explanations followed. The data accumulated. When it finished, Korthak remained motionless for a full minute. Quellis's tentacles curled and uncurled, her species equivalent of nervous fidgeting. Play the simulation again, Korthak finally ordered. Focus on the biometric data. The footage replayed. This time, Quellis pulled up additional analysis screens, breaking down every physiological measurement from the holographic humans in the scenario. Heart rate elevated by 43%, Quellis reported, her voice clinical but strained. Stress hormones at critical levels, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, all maxed out. According to the Verican principle, performance should degrade significantly at these levels. But it doesn't, Korthak observed. No, sir, it doesn't. If anything, their tactical creativity increases. They're improvising solutions faster than our computer models predicted. They're taking risks that should result in failure, but somehow work. Korthak's plates clicked again, faster now. Run a comparison. Pull up combat footage from the Battle of Xerxes Station, the one where human forces were involved. Quellis worked quickly, accessing Coalition military archives. The Battle of Xerxes Station had occurred 2 years ago, when a mixed Coalition force, including humans, defended against raiders. At the time, command staff had noted some unusual behavior from the human contingent, but attributed it to inexperience with Coalition tactics. The footage played on a secondary screen. Human soldiers under heavy fire, cut off from the main force, ammunition running low. Standard doctrine said they should have retreated or requested extraction. Instead, the humans had charged forward into the enemy position. "Freeze there," Korthak commanded. Zoom in on the human commander's face. The image enlarged, showing a human female officer, her face visible through her helmet's transparent visor. Her expression showed clear fear, wide eyes, clenched jaw, rapid breathing. But her actions showed controlled aggression as she led her squad forward. "She's terrified," Quellis noted. "And she's advancing anyway. Sir, this matches what those cadets demonstrated. They're not overcoming fear. They're operating while afraid." Korthak pulled up more files, working with the speed that came from decades of military experience. He searched for every engagement involving human forces in Coalition history. Battle reports, casualty analyses, tactical reviews. A pattern emerged. Human units consistently performed better than predicted in desperate situations. They held positions longer than they should. They took casualties that should have broken their morale but kept fighting. They refused to surrender even when surrender was the logical choice. "Contact Command Psychologist Varanus," Korthak ordered. "I need a full analysis within the hour." While they waited, Korthak continued reviewing data. He found something else, troubling human training methods. The documentation showed that humans specifically trained for scenarios where everything went wrong. They called it worst-case scenario planning. Other Coalition species trained for success with contingency plans for failure. Humans trained for failure and hoped for success. Command Psychologist Varanus arrived quickly, an elderly Zenthari with decades of experience studying species psychology. Korthak showed him the classroom footage and the battle analyses. Varanus watched everything twice before speaking. When he did, his voice carried a weight of concern. This fundamentally contradicts the Varicon principle. That principle states that every sapient species has a fear threshold, a point beyond which psychological collapse occurs. It's been tested across 47 species. It's never been wrong. Until now, Quellis suggested. "Perhaps," Varanus said carefully, "or perhaps humans have the threshold, but it's somewhere beyond physical destruction. They might break psychologically, but only after their bodies have failed." Korthak absorbed this information. As a military commander, he understood tactics, logistics, and strategy. But this was different. This wasn't about weapons or numbers. This was about the fundamental psychology of an entire species. "What are the tactical implications?" he asked directly. Varanus pulled up a tactical modeling program and began inputting new parameters based on the human fear response data. The simulation ran multiple scenarios defending territory, attacking fortified positions, conducting retreats under fire. In every scenario, human forces performed significantly better than the model had previously predicted, especially in losing situations. Standard Coalition doctrine assumes that applying enough pressure will break enemy morale, Varanus explained. With humans, that assumption is questionable. Making them more afraid might make them more dangerous, not less. "That's backwards," Quellis protested. "Fear is supposed to inhibit performance for every other species." "Yes," Varanus agreed. "But humans evolved differently. Their homeworld was extraordinarily hostile. They survived by refusing to quit, even when quitting was logical. That behavior got encoded into their basic psychology. Korthak made his decision. Seal this footage. Classify it as command level only. Restrict access to Tactical Psychology Division and Senior Strategic Staff. Sir? Quellis looked surprised. It's just classroom footage. It's intelligence about a coalition member species' psychological warfare capabilities, Korthak corrected firmly. If our enemies learn that humans fight better when afraid, they might weaponize that knowledge. They might create situations designed to keep human forces in a state of constant fear. He paused, a darker thought occurring to him. Or worse, they might decide that the only way to defeat humans is to kill them quickly, before fear makes them desperate enough to become truly dangerous. The implications settled over the room like a cold shadow. Varanus nodded slowly. I recommend more than just classification. We need to update combat doctrine for any engagement involving human forces. Commanders need to know that standard psychological warfare techniques won't work as expected. Korthak began drafting orders. Send a memo to all coalition military commands. Human psychological profile updated. Standard fear-based tactical assessments do not apply to human forces. New combat doctrine guidelines to follow. Treat this information as tactically sensitive. He added another order. Contact the 3 human cadets from the footage. Chen, Okonkwo, and Rodriguez. They're to report to my office tomorrow morning. I want to understand this better before the report goes to high command. As Quellis left to carry out the orders, Korthak found himself watching the classroom footage one more time. He focused on the 3 young humans, explaining their species' relationship with fear. They hadn't been boasting. They hadn't even seemed proud. They'd just been matter-of-fact about something they considered normal. That was perhaps the most unsettling part. To humans, operating while terrified was just ordinary, expected, normal. Korthak had fought in 17 major engagements during his career. He understood courage. He'd seen soldiers of many species perform brave acts. But courage, as he understood it, meant overcoming fear to do what was necessary. What the humans described wasn't courage. It was something else, entirely. It was a species that couldn't separate fear from action because evolution had welded them together. Fear didn't stop humans, it fueled them. He sent the full report to Coalition High Command on Primara Station, with a priority flag and a personal note. Recommend immediate strategic review. Human psychological profile. Requires complete revision. Current threat assessment models may be dangerously inaccurate for any conflict involving human forces, whether as allies or adversaries. The message transmitted across the vast distance to Primara Station, where the Supreme Strategic Council would receive it within hours. Korthak sat back, his crystalline form settling into his command chair. He'd been a general for 23 years. He'd studied every coalition species' military capabilities. He thought he understood how different species fought and why. The humans had just taught him that he'd been operating with incomplete information. And in warfare, incomplete information got people killed. Tomorrow he would talk to those 3 cadets. He would try to understand this species that the coalition had welcomed as allies without truly understanding what they were. Because Korthak was starting to suspect that humans weren't just another coalition member species with unusual traits. They were something evolution had built specifically for survival in impossible situations. And that made them either the most valuable allies in the galaxy or the most dangerous enemy anyone could face. Possibly both. The Supreme Strategic Council chamber on Primara Station was designed to impress. 17 species had representatives here, seated in a circular arrangement that symbolized equality among coalition members. Today, however, the usual diplomatic atmosphere felt tense. High Admiral Thrain, a Draconid who commanded the coalition defense fleet, called the emergency session to order. We are here to discuss the psychological profile revision for humanity. General Korthak's report has raised significant concerns. The massive holographic display at the chamber's center activated, showing the classroom footage from Station Kepler 9. The council members watched in silence as the three human cadets explained and demonstrated their species' fear response. When it finished, the chamber remained quiet for several long moments. Matriarch Velshara, of the Zenthari delegation, spoke first. Her voice carried the weight of her 300 years of experience. I have reviewed the data thoroughly. We have been treating humans as if they were simply more aggressive Korthians. This was incorrect. Humans are psychologically unique in ways we did not anticipate. 1. The question is whether this uniqueness is advantageous or problematic, added Counselor Drex, representing the Viridian Science Coalition. He projected additional data onto the shared display. I asked our xenopsychology team to analyze human evolutionary history. What they found explains much, but raises additional questions. The display showed Earth's timeline, a planet that had experienced 5 major mass extinction events before humans even evolved. Ice ages, volcanic winters, asteroid impacts, predator species that made current coalition military forces look gentle by comparison. Most sapient species evolved on stable worlds, Drex continued. Worlds where caution and careful planning ensured survival. Earth was not such a world. Earth killed everything repeatedly. Humans survived by developing a psychology that refused to accept extinction. They're broken, said Commander Jakar, a Korthian military strategist known for his blunt assessments. Evolution should have eliminated this trait. Fear exists to prevent death. A species that ignores fear warnings should not survive. Yet, they did survive, Matriarch Velshara pointed out. Not despite their fear response, but because of it. On Earth, the cautious died waiting for safety that never came. The aggressive died attacking stronger enemies. Humans found a third option: be afraid and act anyway. Command Psychologist Veranis, who had been invited to brief the council, stepped forward. May I offer my analysis? Admiral Thrain gestured permission. I've spent the past week studying everything we know about humans, Veranis began. Their literature, their history, their military doctrine, their civilian behavior. A pattern emerges. Humans have a concept they call courage, but it's different from how other species define the term. He pulled up comparative definitions from multiple coalition languages. Each species' word for courage essentially meant overcoming fear to act despite it. The human definition was subtly different. Acting despite fear. Not because you've overcome it, but because you refuse to let it stop you. The difference seems small, Veranis continued, but it's actually profound. Most species view courage as a momentary state. You become brave, do the brave thing, then return to normal. Humans view courage as a constant process. They're always afraid of something, and they're always doing things anyway. What is the practical military implication? Admiral Thrain asked, getting to the core concern. Veranis displayed tactical modeling data. Standard coalition doctrine assumes all forces have a breaking point, a level of fear and stress that causes collapse. The Verican principle is built on this assumption. We use it to calculate everything from siege duration to when retreats become necessary. He highlighted specific numbers. A Zenthari unit breaks at fear level 7, Korthians at level 8, Draconids at level 9. These are scientifically established thresholds. And humans? Admiral Thrain pressed. We don't know, Veranis admitted. Human historical battles show them fighting effectively at what should be level 9 or 10 on the Verican scale. We have documented cases of human soldiers continuing to fight while wounded, outnumbered, and convinced they would die. Their psychological breaking point appears to be beyond our measurement scale. The council chamber filled with concerned murmurs. Multiple representatives began speaking at once until Admiral Thrain called for order. Let me be clear about the problem, Matriarch Velshara said. her voice cutting through the noise. If humans fight better when desperate, and if making them afraid doesn't break their morale, then our entire approach to combined arms warfare needs revision. We cannot predict human unit behavior using our standard models. There's another concern, added General Korthak, who had been invited to present his findings. If our enemies learn this about humans, they might decide that the only way to defeat human forces is overwhelming, lethal force. No psychological warfare, no siege tactics, no gradual pressure, just immediate, total destruction before humans can respond. The implications made several council members visibly uncomfortable. "Are we certain this applies to all humans?" asked Councillor Meraxis of the Silixian delegation. "Perhaps these three cadets are exceptional individuals?" General Korthak shook his head. "We've now reviewed all military engagements involving human forces. The pattern is consistent. We've also examined human-civilian behavior. The same psychology appears there. Humans regularly do things that terrify them. Public speaking, starting businesses, raising children, exploring dangerous places. They call it normal life." "They're insane," Jakar muttered. "No," Veronis corrected firmly. "They're adapted to a world that required insane courage just to survive. There's a difference." Admiral Thrain brought the discussion back to practicalities. "We need to make decisions. First, how do we classify this information?" End quote. "Restrict it," Matriarch Velshera said immediately. "Command level only. Tactical Psychology Division and Senior Strategic Staff. This is intelligence about an allied species' psychological warfare profile. It could be weaponized against them." The council voted. The decision was unanimous. The footage and all related analysis would be classified as Strategic Intelligence Command, Access Only. Second decision, Admiral Thrain continued. "Do we inform the human delegation about this classification?" This generated more debate. Finally, it was decided that humanity's representative to the council, Ambassador Chen Wei, would be briefed but not given full access to the analysis. The official reason: protection of species-specific psychological data for security purposes. Third decision, the Admiral said. "We need updated combat doctrine for any military operation involving human forces. General Korthak, you'll lead that project. Assume human units cannot be evaluated using standard psychological metrics." Korthak's crystalline plates clicked in acknowledgement. Finally, Admiral Thrain looked around the chamber. "We need to address the larger question. Humanity joined the coalition 30 cycles ago. We welcomed them as allies, appreciated their technological contributions, and integrated them into our military structure. But we didn't truly understand what we were allying with." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Humans are not just another member species with interesting quirks. They're a species that evolution designed specifically to survive extinction-level threats by refusing to acknowledge when survival is impossible. That makes them invaluable allies in desperate situations. And terrifying enemies if we ever faced them." Jakar added quietly. No one disagreed. The council session ended with orders drafted and distributed. Coalition military commands across the galaxy received updated human psychological profiles. The revision was subtle in its wording but profound in its implications. Human forces cannot be evaluated using standard fear-based tactical models. Alternative assessment protocols attached. Meanwhile, on Station Kepler 9, Marcus Chen, Aisha Okonkwo, and James Rodriguez sat in the Academy cafeteria, unaware that their simple classroom demonstration had just caused a galaxy-wide revision of military doctrine. "You think we're in trouble?" James asked, pushing food around his plate nervously. "For what?" Aisha replied. "We just answered a question." "Honestly," Marcus said, looking at his two friends, I'm more worried that we scared everyone. Did you see how the other students looked at us after class? Like we were dangerous, James admitted. They sat in silence for a moment. Three young humans who had simply tried to explain something they considered normal. They didn't know that their explanation had revealed a truth that Coalition Command found both valuable and deeply unsettling. Across the galaxy, in secure military facilities and command centers, officers of dozens of species read the updated human profile. Most reached the same conclusion that Matriarch Velshara had written in her personal notes. Humans are either the bravest species in the Coalition or simply incapable of recognizing when they should surrender. Perhaps both. Perhaps there is no difference. Recommend keeping them as allies. I would not want to face them as enemies. The footage remained sealed in classified databases, marked for command-level access only, a simple classroom recording that had become strategic intelligence. And somewhere in those files, Instructor Vexthal had added one final note that perhaps summed up everything. Question: how do humans handle fear? Answer: they don't handle it. They carry it with them and do what needs doing anyway. This is not courage. This is something else. Something that has no proper word in any language, except perhaps human languages. They call it human nature. The files closed. The classifications held. And humanity continued serving in the Coalition, mostly unaware that their allies had just learned to be both grateful and cautious about the species they'd welcomed among the stars.